Hey, how's it going? So let me guess, you clicked on this video because you're curious as to what it would take to get better quality videos than you're getting out of your cell phone. So let me make it simple for you. The first thing you need to do, if you're only shooting with your cell phone, you need to go out and get the latest model GoPro or the previous version. At the time of the shooting, that's the GoPro Hero10 or the Hero11. So that's going to do you pretty well. After you do that, you're going to find out a lot of things about, a little bit about making video, a little bit more about tweaking the settings, and you're also going to notice that the GoPro just doesn't function well or isn't made for low light video. But the GoPro is what I would recommend as the next step because it's so easy to use. It is durable. You're not going to worry about it getting dinged up, by your kid if you hand it to them and let them jump off of, a pier or something like that. If you get SPF 100 on it, you can easily clean that off with soap and water, and it's not going to hurt the camera. You're not going to worry about being in frame because it's so wide. So that's the go-to. That's your next step. After that, if you want something that performs better in low light, you're probably going to want to look at the Sony ZV-E10, which is like a point and shoot camera where you can't change the lens. That's going to do excellent. As a matter of fact, I believe the later model, the new model of the Sony ZV-E10 is coming out next week. That is mid-October 2022. So, and then if you're gonna want something even a little bit better than that and are willing to spend about $1,500, the point and shoot Sony ZV-E10 is gonna run you around $700-800. I'm not sure what the newer one's gonna be, but it's probably gonna be under $1,000. But if you wanna get a little bit better and jump up to something that's gonna cost about, a rig that's gonna cost about $1,500, I would recommend looking at the Sony ZV-E10, the Nikon Z30, and the Fujifilm X-S10. So I went with the Sony ZV-E10, but all three are going to be good, good decisions for you to make. The primary reasons I went with the Sony ZV-E10 is that you can get a Sony 11mm f1.8, which is a great lens to go with for vlogging, run and gun type of content because it's so wide and it's also light. With the other two setups, the Nikon Z30 or the Fujifilm X-S10, you're probably going to want to look at the Viltrox 13mm f1.4. Now that's probably going to perform, that lens is also available for the Sony as well, but it's a little bit heavier and it might perform a little bit better in low light, but the Sony 11mm f1.8 is going to do almost as good, but it's going to be a little bit wider, which is going to help you out with when the camera crops in, either due to active steady shot or other scenarios like you want to shoot in 4K 30 versus 4K 24. There's a little bit more crop there as well. But I went with the Sony for other reasons as well. The primary reasons I went with the Sony system, number one, I already told you about it being a little bit lighter of a setup. It's not much lighter, but it's going to be significant when you're doing in a vlogging situation. It's 1.2 pounds versus 1.5 pounds for the Nikon Z30 setup, and almost 2 pounds for the Fujifilm X-S10 setup. Second reason is autofocus. Sony is almost undebatably the best in the business when it comes to autofocus. There are times with the other cameras you might have some issues with autofocus. And number three, and the biggest reason, is the Sony community. There are tons of content creators out there that make videos on the Sony systems and the Sony ZV-E10 as well, and they will go through a lot of the settings and some tips, tricks, accessories that you can get for the system. And you're going to get the most out of a camera like this, or even better, you're going to want to get familiarized with the settings so that you can get out of the auto modes that this camera does. It does pretty well, but to get the best out of the camera, to get your full bang for the buck for that $1,500 or even more that you're going to spend, you're going to want to become almost one with the camera. It's going to have to become like an extension of your body. So that's the biggest reason. And next we're going to get into some comparisons between the Sony setup that I've got, a GoPro Hero10, and my Pixel 6 Pro. Hey, what's going on? So this is a test of the Sony ZV-E10 with active steady shot on, and my shutter speed set to 1/200. I'm using the Sony 11mm f1.8. The ISO is set to 1000, which seems to be giving me a good exposure where I'm at right here, at least on my face. So we're gonna walk around and we're gonna try to be a little bit steady. I'm shaking all over the place though. I'm going to change hands up. That's a lot better there. And from what I've been seeing in my own experimentation, and also from what I've been seeing on different reviewers' videos, as well as reading, not only does Sony Catalyst Browse do better with the shutter speed set up above 200, but also active steady shot also does the same thing. IBIS, even in the more expensive Sony cameras, just doesn't cut it to me. There may be some really expensive ones where it does, but from what I've seen, even in the A7 series, I'm not seeing very good stabilization. But when you put it in Catalyst Browse, use the gyro information, it is awesome. In addition, the active steady shot isn't bad as long as the you've got your shutter speed set up to at least 1/200, which has some motion blur. It gets rid of a lot of motion blur, and some people don't like that. I don't mind it, so I don't mind using either one. But right now this is active steady shot. I'm not going to be taking this into Catalyst Browse, but I wanted to see how this performed with a higher shutter speed. My ISO again set to 1000, which should allow me to expose to the right and use my Leaming LUT Pro to color grade, and this is how it looks. Alright, so this is a test of the GoPro Hero10 in comparison to the Sony ZV-E10 with the Sony 11mm f1.8. Of course, you got a much wider angle here. You can see more in the frame. The background is going to be probably more in focus than my face. That's just what this camera does. And in this lighting, it looks like my exposure is going to be pretty good, but I'm not sure. This is 4K 24 frames per second, and I'm also using my old microphone with this, the Joby Wavo Mobile, I think that's what it's called. But as you can see, as the sun or I get into a more shaded area, the exposure isn't able to compensate because this is not a good low light performing camera. So also my screen just went dark in the front, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there. All right, so this is the Pixel 6 Pro, 4K 30 frames per second. You know, one thing that I do love about the camera bump is that you can, if you hold it in your hand, you're actually achieving the rule of thirds if your hand is directly in front of you. So that is a pretty good guide. And I don't really mind not seeing myself when I'm shooting with a cell phone. One of the major problems with shooting with a cell phone is that of storage, but also battery life. If you're doing a lot of video on your cell phone, you're gonna run your battery down significantly. I don't care what cell phone you're using. But if you've got an additional camera, then you're going to be using your camera's battery, and maybe have, you know, additional batteries that are removable batteries that you can use, you know, with your GoPro or with your other camera. My camera being the Sony ZV-E10, which is the one that I went with. So that's something that I took into consideration. Also, the video quality is just going to be really, really good on those. So anyway, I'm going to go back to the ZV-E10 and wrap this up. All right, so maybe this is a little bit unfair, and my air conditioner's running. It's what you might hear in the background, even though I've got the Rode video mic Go 2. It does a pretty good job at isolating, you know, what sound that's in front of it. But going on a little bit more about the reason I purchased and wanted to purchase this camera, I actually considered checking out or going with, instead of spending, you know, $1,000 or so on a camera like the ZV-E10 and a good lens, I also considered going with a iPhone 14. And but after watching several reviews, I saw that the iPhone 14 was not very much better. It was a little bit better, but not significantly better than the 13. And of course, iPhone's video quality is better than the Pixels, but it's not going to give you something like this, in my opinion. So that's why I went with the Sony ZV-E10, and I compared it to the Nikon Z30 and the Fujifilm X-S10, I believe it is. And the Nikon with the kit lens, it was pretty good, but I knew that I was going to want some additional lenses. The lens selection wasn't that great. With the Fujifilm, it did have a good vlogging lens. With probably the best one is the Viltrox 13mm f1.4, but that's a heavy setup, number one, and also it's a little bit more expensive than this. And as you can see, I'm having to switch hands as I'm vlogging, and this is only 1.2 pounds. The Fujifilm is almost 2 pounds, and the Nikon Z30, I believe that setup is 1.5 pounds. Yeah, that's why I went with this one. I'm very satisfied. The X factor in all this is the Sony community. There are so many reviewers and videographers that use the Sony system, so there's so much information that's right out there with people's opinions, their setups, and how to use the cameras. There's several different personalities that I like to watch. I could actually literally, you got to find someone that you like watching, that gets you through the boring stuff, going through all the settings and everything. And because with these cameras, even if you go with a point and shoot like the Sony ZV-1, which I did consider also as well, but in the end I wanted something a little bit better, and I wanted interchangeable lenses. But even if you go with something like that, to get the best quality video, you've got to be able to understand your settings enough to get away from the intelligent auto or the program auto modes, and at least go into aperture or shutter speed. But I think at the end of the day, if you understand and listen to these folks like I did for months ahead of time, to understand the camera, understand your settings, to become one with your camera, like it's an extension of your body, you're going to get a lot better footage. So if I don't stop this vlog, I'm going to have to change my ISO to go up a little bit. But anyway, we'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.